Hello. Recently, I realized that it had been quite some time since I had updated all of our old supporters and our current supporters, as well as new supporters that we have, about the work I have done in the past and particularly what I'm doing now in the office. And so I'm doing at least two, perhaps three videos about 7 minutes long that will review the different things that I am responsible for here in the office. Uh, to begin with, when we came into the office in June of 1999, because of my experience, 20 years in church ministry experience, I was asked to join what we had then was the correspondence team, and we answered lots and lots of emails, hundreds of emails, sometimes over 1,000 a week. Many of those, about 80% of them, were Q&A. Questions like, how do I register for this? How do I purchase this? What about what I heard on the radio? Those kind of questions. And we had 7 or 8 people that worked those. Several of those were part-time employees. A couple of college students then, but there were 2 of us, an older lady close to my age and myself, that responded to what we called issue mail. I primarily responded to email. She primarily responded to paper mail or snail mail, conventional mail, if you will. Occasionally we exchanged those responsibilities over individual pieces that came in, depending on the topic. I spent 2 years in that department, primarily because I had lots of experience in dealing with people and resolving conflicts, answering questions, had theological training, and those kind of deals. So after a couple of years, I realized I was getting very tired. And so I talked to my team leader and asked about the possibility of relocating. He understood that, after 2 years of intense work down there, that I could be reaching a stage of burnout. So I had a friend that was working outside the president's office here at FamilyLife, but was directly answerable to the president's office. His name was David Sims, and he and I had become friends through our wives and through homeschooling. So I talked to David. He said, I'm trying to start a team that will help guide the content and make sure content here at FamilyLife is biblical and sound and that it's accurate. That is, verses used to support certain points that we want to make are the right verses, and we don't confuse by proof texting and not getting the right verse with the right principle, the right truth. So it wasn't long before I moved to the content team, where I have been for the last dozen years, and that's where I serve today. In this capacity, we started off doing a lot of general things, a lot of specific request things from either the president's office or from our vice president or director. At that time was Bob Lapine. But we didn't have a lot of definition about what we did. And so, in a sense, the content team evolved. After a couple of years, as part of the team, the senior editor joined our team. And so we became resource and content editors as well as content producers. One of our first really large projects was to read every book that we had in inventory. Those were books that we sold online, books that we sold at our conferences, books that we kept in stock year-round. Many of those Dennis or Barbara's books, or books they wrote together. So we read in a span of 2 years, we read and reviewed every book that we had in inventory, several hundred books. When that project was finally done, we continued the review process, which continues today, and as new material is presented to FamilyLife and said, you ought to consider carrying this. This is outstanding. This is better than an older resource that has been available for many years in bookstores, and then we would review it. A decision would be made based on our reviews. Most of the time, occasionally, those reviews didn't carry the weight that perhaps we felt like they should, but then we were doing the work, and you always think your work's important. Not long after we completed that review process, our international department began to ask us to do special projects for them. And one of those very first projects was to review what they had called a movement maker's manual. And their long-term paradigm they've been using for over 10 years, they discovered was not working well in the international arena in other countries, which was trying to reproduce a family life type ministry in those countries. And the movement maker paradigm and manual actually took the Campus Crusade design of establishing a movement in a country and allowing that movement to grow and to train leadership and to embrace and take the message that Family Life teaches and package it like it needed to be packaged for that nation. This is especially true in Africa and other subcontinent areas. When the pilot of this program was presented internationally, it was absolutely an overwhelming success, and they came back and asked us to do that review. So we did a thorough review. Nick Alsop and I did a very thorough review, sent all of our edits back to the international team, knowing that they didn't have to take any of our suggestions, or they could take all of them. And they accepted all our edits and began to use this worldwide. And so that's really where we've worked and where I've been busy for the very first 3 to 4 years of my time in ministry here. And I'll take up here in the next video and tell you more about what I've done in recent years.